On July 10, 2026, something happened over the South China Sea that only one country had ever pulled off before. A rocket booster, the size of a 20-story building, came screaming back down out of the sky. But it did not deploy landing legs. It did not touch down on solid ground. Instead, it aimed for a ship. And it flew straight into a giant net stretched across the deck. This is the story of that catch, why China built such a strange machine, and the honest answer to the question everyone is asking. How close is China really to catching SpaceX? Let us start with what actually happened, because the details matter. The rocket was a Long March 10B, launched from the Wenchang spaceport on the island of Hainan. It is a serious piece of hardware. The rocket stands about 63 meters tall, 5 meters wide, and weighs roughly 760 tons fully fueled. Its first stage is powered by 7 engines called YF-100K, burning liquid oxygen and kerosene, producing close to 890 tons of thrust at liftoff. In its reusable configuration, it can carry about 16 tons to low Earth orbit. And this was not just a test hop. The rocket did its real job first. More than 90 minutes after liftoff, controllers confirmed that a satellite payload had been placed into orbit. So the mission delivered its cargo, and only then did the interesting part begin. The first stage separated and started falling back toward the planet, and China attempted something no country had ever done exactly this way. Waiting for it, far out at sea, was a specialized recovery vessel named the Linghengzhe. Stretched across its deck was a large net held under tension by cables. As the booster descended, 4 metal hooks on its body were designed to snag that net. A hydraulic damping system absorbed the leftover energy of the fall, and a set of auxiliary clamps locked the booster in place. Roughly 11 minutes after launch, the State Space Corporation confirmed it. The catch was successful. Now, how do you steer a falling rocket into a net that is barely bigger than the rocket itself? The answer is a set of titanium grid fins near the top of the booster. During the hypersonic and supersonic parts of the descent, these fins tilt and adjust, nudging the vehicle onto a precise path. If you have ever watched a SpaceX Falcon 9 come home, you have seen the same idea. Grid fins are the secret to threading a needle from the edge of space. But here is the clever twist that separates China's approach from SpaceX. A Falcon 9 lands on its own legs. Those legs are heavy, and every kilogram of landing hardware you bolt onto the rocket is a kilogram of satellite you cannot carry. China's engineers made a different bet. By removing the landing legs entirely and shifting the catching hardware onto the ship, the booster itself gets lighter. A lighter booster means more payload to orbit, or a cheaper launch. It is a genuinely different philosophy, and on this first attempt, it worked. That success made China only the second nation in history to recover an orbital-class booster. For years, this was a club with exactly one member. SpaceX stood completely alone. So the symbolism here is huge. A second country has now shown it can bring a real orbital rocket back from a real mission and set it down intact. That is a milestone worth taking seriously, and it is why headlines around the world lit up. And that is also where we need to slow down. Because a lot of those headlines said something like, China's rocket is now a nightmare for SpaceX. That framing is exciting, but it is not honest. Catching up on one milestone is not the same as catching up overall. So let us look at the actual numbers, side by side, and let the facts speak. As of mid-July 2026, rockets in the Falcon 9 family had launched 677 times. 674 of those were full mission successes. Falcon boosters had landed successfully 637 times, out of 650 attempts. Read those numbers again slowly. China has landed 1. SpaceX has landed more than 600. This is not a close race on the scoreboard. It is one team with a single point, standing across from a team with hundreds. It gets more lopsided when you look at reuse. The whole point of landing a booster is to fly it again. On July 9, 2026, just one day before China's catch, a single SpaceX booster known as B-1067 flew for the record 36th time. Not 36 different rockets. The same rocket, 36 flights. China has yet to refly its booster even once. The plan is to inspect, refurbish, and launch that same stage again before the end of the year, and that reflight will be the true test. Landing a rocket is hard. Landing it in good enough shape to fly again, cheaply, and over, is the actual mountain. It also helps to remember how long this took SpaceX. The company's first successful booster landing came all the way back in December 2015. It then spent years turning that single landing into a reliable, everyday process, and it survived plenty of crashes and explosions along the way. So when China lands its first booster in 2026, one honest way to read it is this. On this specific milestone, China is arriving roughly a decade after SpaceX first did it. That is not an insult, it is simply the timeline. And it tells you how much refining still lies ahead, because the gap between a first landing and a 100th landing is where the real difficulty lives. Then there is cadence, the speed of launching. By July 2026, SpaceX had already flown around 80 Falcon 9 missions that year alone, and its yearly rate routinely passes 100 launches. That is a rocket going up every few days, most of them carrying Starlink internet satellites. China's Long March 10B just flew its landmark mission once. So even if the technology gap closes, there is an enormous gap in industrial rhythm, in the sheer factory-like pace that makes SpaceX so hard to compete with. So if China is so far behind, why pour billions into this at all? The answer is not really about one rocket. It is about what the rocket enables. SpaceX turned cheap, reusable launch into a weapon. It uses its own rockets to build Starlink, a mega-constellation of internet satellites already blanketing the globe. Roughly 80% of SpaceX flights this year existed to grow that network. Reuse is what makes it affordable, and Starlink is quietly becoming one of the most powerful communication systems on Earth. China does not want to be locked out of that future. There is also a strategic layer here that is impossible to ignore. Satellite internet is not only about streaming video in remote villages. A global network in orbit is critical infrastructure. It can connect ships, aircraft, and troops on the move. It can keep a country online when ground networks fail or are deliberately cut. Starlink has already played a visible role in conflicts around the world, and governments everywhere have taken notice. For China, depending on an American company for that kind of connectivity is simply not acceptable. Building its own constellations, launched on its own reusable rockets, is as much about sovereignty and national security as it is about business. That is why China is racing to build its own answers. There are two enormous projects underway. One is called Guowang, a state network with around 13,000 planned satellites. The other is called Qianfan, meaning thousand sails, aiming for over 15,000. Together these constellations plan for more than 28,000 satellites. By the middle of 2026, over 350 had already been launched, and the pace is speeding up. Qianfan is even signing early service deals in Brazil, Malaysia, Kazakhstan, and Turkey, going after the same global customers as Starlink. But you cannot build a constellation of 28,000 satellites by throwing away a rocket every launch. The math does not work. To fill those orbits, China needs cheap, reusable rockets flying constantly. Suddenly the net catch on that ship makes complete sense. It is not a stunt. It is the missing piece of a much larger machine. Without reusable rockets, China's answer to Starlink stays stuck on the launch pad. To really understand why reuse is worth all this trouble, think about the cost. Traditionally, every single launch throws away tens of millions of dollars of hardware, burning it up in the atmosphere or dumping it into the ocean. Reusing a booster spreads that enormous cost across many flights instead of just one. It is the difference between scrapping a passenger jet after a single trip, and flying that same jet thousands of times. That one idea is what let SpaceX undercut every competitor on the planet, and it is the exact advantage China is now trying to copy. Cheap access to space is not a luxury. It is the foundation that everything else, from satellite internet to moon missions, is built on top of. And it is not only the state doing this. A wave of private Chinese companies is chasing the same prize. The most watched is a company called LandSpace, building a reusable rocket named Zhuke 3. It burns liquid oxygen and methane, the same modern fuel combination SpaceX chose for its giant Starship. LandSpace designed Zhuke-3 to be reused at least 20 times. Its maiden flight ended in a failure back in December 2025, but the company plans a recovery test and is aiming for its first landing and reflight attempt in the final quarter of 2026. What makes LandSpace interesting is the goal behind it. The company wants to slash the cost of reaching orbit in China from around 100,000 yuan per kilogram down to about 20,000. That is a target of cutting the price of space by roughly 80%. If they hit it, China would have not just one reusable rocket, but a competitive commercial launch industry. That is the real long game, and it is exactly the path SpaceX walked a decade earlier. So where does that leave us? Let us be fair to both sides. What China achieved on July 10 is real, and it is genuinely impressive. A net catch recovery from an orbital mission, on the first try, is a hard engineering problem solved. Anyone waving it away is not paying attention. China has clearly entered the reusable rocket race, and it is moving faster than many experts predicted even 2 years ago. But at the same time, SpaceX is not standing still waiting to be caught. While China celebrates landing one booster, SpaceX is flying the same booster 36 times, launching over 100 missions a year, and testing Starship, a fully reusable rocket in a completely different size class. The honest picture is not a nightmare for SpaceX. The honest picture is a determined challenger taking its first real step onto a road SpaceX has already been running down for years. And that is what makes the next 12 months so worth watching. The single most important event will be that reflight. If China takes the exact booster it just caught, refurbishes it, and successfully launches it again before the end of 2026, then the story changes. That would prove the recovery was not a one-time spectacle, but the start of a real reusable system. Until that happens, China has proven it can catch a rocket. It has not yet proven it can catch SpaceX. So here is the takeaway. Do not believe the headlines that say the race is over, in either direction. China just did something only one country had ever done, and that is a big deal. But the gap in flights, in reuse, in speed, and in scale is still measured in years, not months. The real contest is not about a single dramatic catch at sea. It is about who can make going to space boring, routine, and cheap, thousands of times over. SpaceX is winning that race today. China just announced it fully intends to run it. If you found this useful, subscribe, and I will keep breaking down the moments that actually move the future of technology. Thanks for watching.